So everything else is fiction in the book, but the house is real, almost down to every detail. I think I added a downstairs office.
Welcome to our latest Book Reporter Talks to interview. Our guest today is Meg Mitchell Moore, whose latest book, Vacationland, is a Bets On selection, as have her two previous books, Two Truths and a Lie and The Islanders. I absolutely love this book. I felt like I was on vacation while I was reading it, which is really nice because I don't have time to leave my desk very often. Yeah. So I absolutely love that. So welcome, Meg. So great to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I always love talking to you. So I'm delighted you asked me back.
Oh, I'm so glad. So glad. So let's start by you telling us about Vacationland instead of me spilling the beans about it.
Sure. Vacationland takes place in a home on the coast of Mid-Coast, Maine, in a little hamlet called Owl's Head, which is, for anyone familiar with that area, it's right across the harbor from Rockland, the town of Rockland, near Camden, that whole area. And this is the only book I've written that takes place in it's based on an actual house. So this is the house belonging to one of my very best friends from forever ago. It's her family's home. And I've been going there as a guest forever, as a very lucky guest. And I've always wanted to, it's a perfect setting for a book. So I finally set a book there. So everything else is fiction in the book, but the house is real, almost down to every detail. I think I added a downstairs office. I added a couple of things, but for the most part, it is the house as it is. And I put a family inside of it, and it's a multi-generational tale. So we have the matriarch and patriarch of the house and their daughter, and they live there every summer. And then their daughter, who lives in Brooklyn, comes this particular summer with her three children. Her husband stays behind in Brooklyn because he's tied up in work. So we have these three generations. And then we have a woman named Christy, who is the stranger who comes to town. And she appears in this area of Maine for a reason that we don't know until later in the book. And she has a connection to the family. So a lot of the book is about figuring out what that connection is to the family, but it's a lot about aging and sick parents and having little kids and balancing work and life and old love and young love and a little bit of everything.
Yeah, just like it's a perfect beach book. It's a perfect escape kind of a book to just sit there and enjoy. So what was the kernel that prompted this idea? Was it going to this house and saying, I'd love to set something here, or where was it?
Yeah, this time it was the house. I think in other books I've had characters first, or I've had a town first, but this time it was the house. And I don't remember when I said this is who lives in the house. So that part, it's a little fuzzy once the book is out, but definitely this started with the setting, which is not always how it goes for me, but
a lot of times it is character for you. So it's very, very interesting to see this is what was going on. Right. I love the setting in Maine. I haven't been there a lot. Like I haven't spent a lot of time. I just know the water's very cold up in Maine. It's very, very different than anything that's going on. It's a special place, and it's very different from other beach communities that I don't think people really think about. Everybody think the beach is the same. Beach at the Jersey Shore, the beach up on the Cape. What's different, and what do you love about it up in Maine?
Yeah, it is different. It is very, for one thing, you don't have big, long stretches of sandy beach, despite the cover showing a sandy beach. It's more rocky coast, and it's not an extended area where a lot of people gather. So people are more likely to have their homes in separate places, and they might have a community within their little town or neighborhood or area, but it's not a giant, it's not the way that, Harwich is on the Cape, where people would be going to the same long stretch of beach and might run into each other. It's more private in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And you definitely have a town, you have the town of Rockland and the town of Camden, and those are both very vibrant and lively. But I just think of it as being a little more private. So I think that there are people sort of tucked away in their houses doing their own thing in a way that you might not have on the Jersey Shore, or that you wouldn't have the opposite, that you would there. So it's different in that way.
It's different. And this sounds like it's a big house as well. And I love that these vacation houses have names. This one you named Ship's View. Is that the same name as your friend's house?
No, it doesn't have a name. So I gave it a name. Along with the downstairs office, I gave it a name, and I checked it out with them to see if that was okay. It is on a little, they have their own private street that has its own name that is similar to what I named the house, but the house itself doesn't have a name. But yeah, I feel like summer homes and books usually have names. So
we have to get them a little placard for their house. You have to have a little placard made.
Right.
A book was written here. This book is inspired, some little quote line. So Louise is the mother. She's up there with her three children. And the three children's varied personalities really add to the book, because They give you a little bit of comic relief as time goes on, a little bit of remembering what it was like to be young or a teenager and brought to this magical place for the time. So tell us about, first of all, why they're 3 and why you included the kids as well, because they,
Yeah.
they definitely lend some humor.
I love these kids. These are probably my favorite. I've written a lot. All my books have some kids in them. Lately I've been writing a lot more teens than kids because I have teens, but I loved going back to little kids, and I just love these kids. In fact, when you asked me, I feel like this story might have started with the kids. Looking back, there's a scene in the very beginning when they're on the rocks and they've just gotten out of the car from this long drive from Brooklyn, and they're look so excited about summer. I think that might have been the Colonel, actually, now that I think about it. But anyway, I had 3 because I have 3 myself, and 3 is an overwhelming number sometimes. So I wanted the mother to be overwhelmed because you can't always keep an eye on 3 kids at the same time. So I sort of wanted that element of chaos that she needed, the help of her mother when she could get it, and she was overwhelmed. And so I wanted to have that. And I wanted these 3 really different personalities. So I'm so glad you picked up on that because they're young. They're 7, 10, and 12. The boy is 12, almost 13. And then 2 girls who are 10 and 7. And I really wanted them to be so different from one another. The boy is different because he's a boy, but he's also on the cusp of teenagehood, and he meets his first love in the summer. So he's sort of going off into this teenage world. And the other 2, the youngest one wants her brother to be her friend like he always is. And she's kind of mad that he met this girl, and she's this little fierce thing. And I just love her. And then the middle one is just a little more thoughtful and dreamy. So I just really, I could have written a whole book about these kids. I just love them. They're very real to me. I really do like them. So thank you for picking up on that.
Yeah, and I really love that one of the children, I'm trying to see what her name is. She's the one that's writing notes home to her father.
Oh yeah, Abigail.
And I love that Abigail's writing these notes home to her father, telling him what's really going on there from her point of view. Like, you have to come up here. Mom is a wreck. You don't understand what's going on. And of course, the mother is seeing these notes. And it's very, very funny how this child is interpreting everything that's going on, like out of the mouths of babes of what's going on. Very assertive, like, Dad, come now. You know?
Yeah, I wanted to have that sort of kids perspective because kids know the deal. They just don't always, we don't give them credit all the time for understanding what's going on. And maybe they don't understand it, but they think they do, which is even more interesting. So they think I got this. I know what the situation is, but they might have it all wrong. And that can be even more funny and heartbreaking too.
But she's definitely going, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, in the way children do when they send a note. And it's always like a chronicle of the day. Like, we woke up, then we went to the beach, then we did this, and you don't know what happened, and it's, she was also writing in that sort of like a mystery book. Like, you constantly feel like she's writing, and then let me tell you what happened around the corner. And I love that kind of urgency from what she's writing. It's like, because there's some children's mystery author, and I kept thinking of her, like the tone of her book, her tone of her little letters home.
Yeah. And I just like her age. Their ages are so important because she's 10. So she's so far from being a teenager. So there's something really sweet about a 10-year-old girl and really knowing sort of, but not knowing in the way that a teenage girl is. And having 3 daughters, I watched them go through all the phases. And there's something that about those 10-year-old girls that I just loved that age. I loved how smart and aware they were, but also still so playful and childlike. So that's a magical age to me, the age of 10.
Yeah. And then they start getting more aware of everything that's going on and more philosophical about the way everyone's treating them. Right now, it's just like, I'm doing my thing and I'm right. And then later on, it's like, maybe
how they're viewed in the world. And as they get older, they start to see how they're viewed, and that becomes part of them. And that's always kind of sad to watch, but it happens to everybody. It's just part of growing up. So I kind of like it before they hit that age when they're just themselves 100%.
Yeah. Like that's where you're going to go from there. Louisa's dad has Alzheimer's, which is brutal to watch. He's a formidable judge. He's had a fabulous career. And now his whole life is unraveling. He disappears at one point. Everybody's trying to find him. And it's touched so many families. I mean, so many people who have parents who are living a long life end up seeing that this is what's ending up happening. So what drew you to add a character like this? Is it because so many people are seeing this in their lives and it made sense to the story?
It's partly that. It's partly I wanted part of this, the secret of the book has to do with something about his past. And I wanted him not to be able to articulate it or understand it the way that people around him understood it. So it was important to me to sort of have that, how much is he, I mean, we don't know inside the brains ourselves of people who are suffering from Alzheimer's, but was he completely aware of things in his own mind, and yet people outside didn't know what he knew? So I think that sort of mystery adds to it. So it's partly that, it's partly that, yes, it's part of what people in the middle generation are dealing with, parents going through that while they're dealing with their own kids. So I wanted sort of that, I haven't, knock on wood, been through that myself with anybody that I'm really close to, but I have some very good friends who have, and I talked to a friend of mine a lot about her dad and their experiences, and she was very generous with me, telling me, what she and her family had been through, and some of the stories, and same thing, her father, I forgot what he did for a living, but something phenomenal, and this character was a state Supreme Court justice, and had this very illustrious career, and now doesn't, not on any given day, might not even know that he had that career. So she talked to me a lot about that and was really open with me. So I felt like I had some understanding of it, but having not been through it, that's probably also why it was possible for me to write about it. If I was going through it, it might have been too close to home, but I was able to sort of be at a remove from it.
Yeah, and it's right. It does contribute to the secret of what's going on in the story, which interestingly, Louisa's mother, Annie, has harbored the secret for a long time. And she parses out what she knows to Louisa in a conversation, which is kind of surprising. Like, it's like, what do you know? And we're going to keep the secret secret. Why was it important to you that Annie knew about it, about what was going on? Does it make her stronger as a person for having done that?
I don't know if it makes her stronger. I wanted her to be of the generation where she was possibly going to support her husband no matter what. Not that everybody does that, but I wanted her to be that kind of person. And I sort of wanted that tight-lipped, she came from money and from Boston, and she had that sort of don't say anything to anybody if something isn't perfect. And I wanted that because I think that's really fascinating when that's part of their lives. And this is, and then when her daughter at age almost 40 finds out a secret that she didn't know about, I wanted to have that tension where it wasn't like, I don't think her mother ever admits that she should have told her sooner, or that wasn't the way to do it. She was like, nope, this is why I decided to do it. And this is how, and that's why. And she had her reasons. And I think that's really interesting. It's almost as interesting as a big drama sometimes, to have that sort of quiet perseverance over a lifetime.
Yeah, over a lifetime of what's going on. Then we've got the character of Christy, who arrives on a bus with an agenda to settle in Maine. I also love that she comes in, and I've been doing a lot of presentations to our readers and to libraries about summer reading. And I say she comes with $761. And I always love that she had $761. I figure that's like, that she's counting every single dollar if that's what she's doing. So what can you tell us about her? Because she's really the opening of the book, and she was opening of the audiobook as well. So you automatically have like a woman came to town, and It goes from there.
Right. It's one of the oldest plot devices. Exactly. A stranger comes to town. So I can't remember. I always knew that she had the secret. I think when I started writing, I almost feel like it was a male character and she was the girlfriend. It was something really convoluted. And my editor said, why isn't this just the character? And I said, oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So I had to clean it up. And then she became really clear to me. And she was the one. It's funny, this book went through a lot of revisions and edits over a long time. And she was always good. She never needed work. Louisa needed a lot of work. The parents needed work. Everything needed work. But Christy was always who she was. And I loved, I just felt like I knew her right away. And then that exploration of class and privilege is always interesting to me. So she's the one on the other side. She doesn't have the privilege that Louisa has. And she's looking at this world from the outside. And there's this, in the very beginning, she was trying to find a rental home in Rockland, which is very different from this waterfront home where Louisa lives. And she sees these college kids just playing Frisbee or something outside. And it's the life that she doesn't even understand. Who are these girls with this shiny hair who don't have to worry about money and with these college stickers on their cars? And I'm always interested in the difference between classes like that.
Yeah. And you really realize she's looking at this place and she's trying to negotiate the rent, and he wants first and last. How about just first? How about just this? And you realize her desperation. You realize that she's come with an agenda of something she wants to do, but by the same token, it's rough. It's rough of what's going to happen of her trying to get a job. And she's really, you're right, that person on the other end of the tracks that we sometimes see anonymously in a restaurant. Like shortly after we read this book, we were at the beach and I was sitting there and we were in a restaurant. And I was thinking, these are the people who are working here. These aren't the people that have all these big beach houses. And what are their stories that they're working here in the middle of May before the season even opens? Who are they? And what's going on? So
yeah, everyone has a story. Yep.
Everybody's got a story. So we're sitting there, we're at the beach, we've got all these fabulous things going on, but yet we're talking about something else as well, because both Louisa and her husband, Stephen, have needs, that a reason that they need money, and they want to tap into something that's called the emergency account they put together. And I thought it was such a clever thing. They've done this, of putting together this, I think it was 10% of every paycheck or whatever that they were putting away in this emergency account. And they both have these reasons for doing it. And the reasons are very, very different. And in both senses, the other spouse says, no, like, this is not what we're going to do. And I found it was really interesting, because we realize what people are passionate about and feeling like that they need to do something about. And they're not even thinking of what the other person, they're convinced that this is the right thing to do. Interesting for you to be writing those two looks at that same thing.
Yeah, that was interesting. And that also, it seems really simple when you're explaining it now, and hopefully that's how it comes across in the book. But that also took, for some reason, I couldn't get that money piece right. I couldn't get the tension between the husband and wife over money right in many drafts. And I just, my editor and agent and I kept throwing around ideas, and it was just really convoluted every time I tried it. Well, maybe the money could be this much and for this amount, but it had to be they had to be really at loggerheads about it for it to be a real source of tension. And it took me a long time to figure it out for some reason. So now it makes sense to me. And now I think that's, because they're not poor, but like I think I have Louisa at some point thinking there's so many levels of wealth. There's her parents' kind of wealth. There's many levels above them. There's where she and Stephen are, where they're not going to be kicked out of their home, but they still have to worry about money and what are they going to save and how are they going to send their kids to college. And then there's the Christy level, where she's barely making her rent. And there's a level below Christy that we don't see in this book, but that exists. So I think that's what was interesting, is how can there still be tension at the level that they should be fine. Everything's fine. They both have jobs. Why is it not fine? Because it's still hard. It's still expensive to replace your dishwasher when it breaks or whatever it is, no matter, unless you're very, very wealthy. So I really liked looking at that and trying to find that tension.
Yeah. And, I think that we've looked at it a lot through that lens over during the pandemic as well. It's like trying to get things, trying to do things. It becomes a lot more expensive, harder to get. Like we have a friend who's redoing the kitchen, and they said the appliances will be ready in 8 months. The cabinets will be ready in like 6. Right. And I'm like, this isn't even living. This is like camping or something like that. But that's a lot of what people are going through right now. And it's, yes, we've got access to this money, but this is special money. And we each have a special thing to use it for, but neither of us can agree. And I really like that, because you get passionate about things sometimes in a marriage. Like, I think this is the most important thing. Right. At one point, I just wanted a hot tub. That's all I wanted. We couldn't even agree where the hot tub was going to go, let alone that we were going to get the hot tub. We went and looked at hot tubs one day, and the guy kept following up with us. And I'm like, no. Like, this is like a little idea. This isn't a right every time they go on sale idea. This is just a thinking idea. And you know what I mean? It's like you get this idea of something you're going to do, and it's like, all right, well, we'll think about this for a very long time. This is going to be the one we come back to in the conversation. So like the other night, we have a pool here, it makes it even funnier. My husband says, and he says, my back is really killing him. I said, if we had that hot tub, he goes, yep, we're back to the hot tub again. And I know. There's always thinking of the emergency fund. You're back to the hot tub.
It's really interesting. And once you have kids and you're trying to figure out their futures too, you have to consider all that. But you might have something that's really important to you. But yeah, if the other person doesn't agree, you can't take that money and do it.
No. And his idea would be rip out a garden, because my idea of where it would go would be too far to go in the snow. And I go, I'll shovel. And he goes, you got to see that one. You know what I mean? I was like,
no, I hear you. Yeah.
It's really, really funny. It's funny, the conversations that ensue. Yeah. So this amazing house that Louise and the children are at is something that happens for a lot of families, where they just go to this place. And yet when you go for the whole summer, it's a completely different experience than just being there for 2 weeks. I mean, I've gone to places where we've stayed with people for a weekend, or we stayed for a week, but it's not like that getting enmeshed into the whole culture of the place. And there's something magical about that. And when you've got the book broken up into chapters of June, July, August, of what's going on, you know that summer's coming to a close, you know where you're in the middle of it, and you're just picturing how magical it is to be at a place like this for that extended period of time. Have you ever had that happen with you or with friends, that you were able to just go do that extended time?
I was in college, actually. I was so lucky. And speaking of family homes that we no longer own, my father's mother owned a home or lived on Cape Cod for a long time. And then when she passed away, the house went to my father. And for my summers in college, I was allowed, somehow this is a miracle, to live rent-free with my college friends in this little house on the Cape. It wasn't anything like this, huge waterfront house, but this little house, and we could have summer jobs, and we got our waitressing jobs, and we lived there for, I think we did it at least 3 years in a row. And it was amazing. It was like the chance of a lifetime, and we didn't have to pay rent. And then it ended up that my father sold the house. And I always think, oh, I wish I could have bought that house, because now, of course, it's worth like 10 times as much as she sold it for. Anyway, so I was very lucky to have that experience, but I didn't, we didn't grow up every year of my life going to the same house. I've been, I talk about this on every event I do, but I'm currently listening to the audiobook of The Big House. Did you ever read that book?
No, I read that. No, really good.
Almost 20 years old now. I somehow missed it. A bookseller mentioned it to me when I was doing a bookseller event a few weeks ago. And it is phenomenal. It won the National Book Award, I think in maybe 2004. And it's a memoir of a house on the Cape. So it's nonfiction, and it is 100 years in this family's home. And there's a lot of similarities between that house and this house in Maine, just in kind of it's a little, it's not every bathroom is redone. It's not super brand new, and yet it's on the water and it has all these wonderful things. And this family in the book ends up, well, I think they're going to have to sell the house. I'm not at the end yet, but it's that same thing. This is a place that these people grew up going to every single summer, their whole lives. So you get there and the towels hanging on the porch railings and all that stuff that's just there for the whole summer. So I think that's fascinating, people who do that from a very young age. And that's how my friend has gone to this home forever since she was really little. That's where she would go every summer.
They'll just disappear. And it's also interesting because there's a certain smell to those houses as well. There's a dampness, there's a sand smell, there's a seaweed smell. There's something and we've gone out to visit friends out in the Hamptons who we never went out for longer than a weekend, but you were swimming in the pond at the house and you were doing all these things, and you realizing when you were in that bed, how many other people had been in that room, like whose room had that been through the years, and what was the view and where was the light coming in and all those kinds of things. And you're thinking not only of you being there, but the other people that were there as well and what their stories were. So.
Yeah, in this house, it was my friend's grandmother, who's long gone, who originally had the house built, and they called her Mimi. And so there's still this little bedroom because it has an attached bath, and it's called Mimi's room. And I don't even know if I don't even think I met Mimi, but I call it Mimi's room, and everybody will be like, "Oh, these people are coming, put them in Mimi's room." And it will always be that. And then there's the pink room, and there's the whatever, I forgot, the bunk room, and all these different rooms. And it's just, it is really magical.
Yeah, like, where am I going to be this time? Am I in? And if you go up with your children, it's a different thing. Oh, wait, they're going to go here, you're going to go there, and this is what it's going to be. And
right.
Yeah. And then everybody's got to get used to the children, what their schedules are, what their eating habits are, which are completely different than what everybody else's is, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So then we've got this one point, Louise is out with an old friend and she's dancing. And I love this line, like everything is ahead of them and nothing behind. And that is such a great line, because there's this moment that you really don't think about when you're in your 20s, that's exactly what's going on. Everything is ahead of you. Meanwhile, you're so trying to grapple with where you are that you're not really thinking about that. So do you think that way often? Do you think about that line a lot? Because it was such a great line.
Oh, thank you. I'm a pretty nostalgic person in general. I mean, I do often think about where I am in my stage of life and where I was at what point, not in a sad way, but more in an aware way. I'm really aware of time passing for some reason. So I think I gave that to my character, and she is almost 40 and she knows pretty much what her professional and family life are going to look like unless there's a dramatic change. But every now and then you still want to, go out and pretend that's not who you are just for a night, because that's fun. So I like the nostalgia in this book, because she had a friend. This is the friend that she was friends with a long time ago and then was no longer friends with, but her, a summer friend. And I like the idea of a summer friend and a boy she dated, and they all come back into her lives, but they're grownups now. So they've all gone different ways. So I'm really interested in that as a theme and as a sort of a background noise in most of my books, I think.
It's like when you're driving in the car and you hear a certain song and you remember exactly where you were that summer, exactly the people you were with, and what that song meant. And it means something very different than does now. And but there's times where you can turn on, I mean, we have Sirius XM in the car, so I'll go 70s, 80s, 90s and be looking, and you're just sitting there going, I remember where we were when we heard that song and what that meant. And it's completely fun.
Songs and smells are both so nostalgic. It's really, yeah, it's fascinating.
So Louise is on this a sabbatical, and she's ostensibly supposed to be finishing this book that she's working on. So I love the way she keeps trying to get the writing done, and she parses it into smaller bits every day. Like today, I'm going to write 20 pages. I'm going to write 10. I'm going to write 5. I'm going to write 1. If I can get a word down on the page, I'm going to be really excited about it. So as you, an author, are approaching a deadline, do you start getting into this parsing thing of what you're going to do and how much you're going to do? Or are you on task all the way around?
No, I try to be, but no, life gets in the way. So I think I do that. I do it more with word counts than Louisa does pages, right? But I'm always really aware of the word count. So I know my novels are going to be about 105, 110,000 words. So I'll think, okay, I have 9 months. That's no problem. I'll do this much every day. And I do that kind of math. Then all of a sudden 3 months went by and I have to redo the math. I'm like, oh gosh, I have to write 1,600 words a day to get it done. So, that definitely happens to me, but I wanted her to have that sort of, I just wanted some pressure, some outside pressure. I wanted her to have a profession because I wanted her to have that, be interesting and have this other world. But I also wanted that pressure on her where she's like, okay, I'm home now. Everything's easy. My mom will help out, but it's never easy. It's never easy. So you still have to figure out how to do it. So I wanted that. And I have a friend who's a professor who really gave me a lot of insight into being a female in that field can be really hard. And she said she knows no professors who have 3 kids. I mean, this woman has kids and has done an amazing job, but she said it's very unusual to have more than 1 kid when you're trying to publish like that and be a professor. And so that extra pressure of all these people getting ahead of her in her field because she has these kids and she loves these kids and she loves her family, but it's, she's trying to keep up with these people who can travel to conferences at the drop of a hat and can present their papers all the time. And she can't always do that. So I sort of wanted that to be a little bit of the tension behind the scenes as well.
Well, you know what, too? I thought that once you had tenure, you didn't have to worry about that. Like I thought that, and I didn't realize you still needed to keep publishing. Right. I remember I was talking to a professor who's over at Fordham who was also a writer, Mary Bly, and she's like, no, you do not understand the pressure on you to continue to publish, to continue to write, to continue to go do things. And even though you're tenured and you think you're successful in your career. And then there came a point at Fordham where they want everyone who's taught to be doctorates because they felt like the price that they were charging to go to school there, that's what the parents should have. They should have. And it was really interesting to hear that because there may have been people who were fabulous teachers who hadn't been academics in that way, but no, everyone has to do that now. And the pressure on, especially when I won't give something away, that she finds out something conflicting is happening about her book. And there's a moment of finding out, somebody's got the same title of your book or somebody, and especially when people are writing historical fiction, they're always afraid that somebody else is going to find this character that no one's found ever, and they're going to write it and the book's going to come out first. It's a big panic moment.
It's got to be so stressful. It's like that year when Deep Impact and the other Comet movie both came out. I forgot what the other Comet movie was, but remember there were 2 movies about comets. Yes. So yeah, it happens sometimes. It definitely happens. And I really was important to me for the other woman writing another book to be younger and to be unencumbered with a family and to have sort of brighter future that she's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to compete with this 28-year-old who doesn't have to do all these other things in her life? So that's life,
And she brought up also, I think that she was beautiful and she was young. And that was another thing that I think that women of a certain age start to worry about is like, there's younger, more beautiful, more free person to go and do that. And that also became something because I think she felt that she might be able to go in and woo a room differently than she would be able to do at her age. Like there's a time where people sit there and go, maybe my, appeal has kind of worn down,
Right. Which you wouldn't think you have to worry about as a history professor, but it's probably on her mind as well,
It's on it's like, this is what's going to do. So what is your typical writing schedule like to get to that 105, 110,000 words?
So this book I wrote most of it during COVID. So this one was wacky and it took way longer. This was actually supposed to come out a full year last summer. That was the idea. 2 Truths and a Lie came out 2020 and this was supposed to come out 2021. And then my next one would be coming out now. But so 2 summers ago, that COVID summer, I had a draft due early June, I think. And I revised once over the summer. And then my editor and my editor must have called my agent and said, listen, I really think we should hold off a year. And I was devastated. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, it's a fine book now, but I think it can be really, really good. I think you have all these themes that you're working with and you haven't really gotten into them. And if you publish it the way it is, you'll just kind of be skirting over the stuff instead of getting into it. I think you should take more time. And she said, if you really want to put it out next year, we'll do it. We can tie up line edits and be done. And I had really thought about it, and she was absolutely right. So we spent a lot more time going through several more drafts over that next year. So this one took longer. The one that will come out next summer, for some reason, came a little quicker this year. So a typical schedule would be, I think I started that one in late September, early October. I wrote my words every day that I could, and I had a draft by early April, and I've done one revision on that. I'm waiting for, I think, the line edits to come back to me, and hopefully that will be ready to go, pretty soon, sometime this summer, ready to go for production. So that would be typical and ideal, but it's not, doesn't always happen, doesn't always happen the ideal way.
Well, I will tell you that a lot of books that came out that were written during COVID were not terrific. And I'm the first one to say this. And there are many authors whose books, and I've spoken about this a lot, I really love. And I thought that the book that came out during that time was weak. And I think it's a lot, there was other emotions going other places on everybody's part, agent, editor, author, whatever. And some people did make the decision to just go ahead. Like, we'll just keep proceeding because I'm a book a year, whatever. And I think it was rough because I don't think the best book was delivered in some cases. And there was a natural distraction that came with that we needed to sort of be kind to ourselves about and say, this is the way the world is right now, and waiting another year is not going to be the worst thing that ever happened. So
exactly.
There are times I could sit there and say, I know exactly where you were when you wrote this book. And it was year one of COVID, and year two was different. It was just different. But year one, where I really love, there's a friend in publishing. She said, I thought we were going home for 2 weeks so they could clean the office. I left all my shoes there. She says, I have to go to the office. I've got to get my shoes. All I've got is a pair of sneakers. And it was really that when we really think back on what that was like, it was not just the virus what was going on. It was not just the pandemic. It was the complete uncertainty about every single thing in your life. I did an event last night with Lisa Scottolini. She says, really, when you think back, that we were taking cleansing products to our boxes of cereal when we came home from the food store.
Yeah, I know. It's so weird to think about.
It was like we were spraying all over the place. I remember I found all these wipes in my car, like this huge box of wipes. And now it's stuck in my glove box. And I'm like, oh, that's right. When I got in the car after the driver brought around at the parking garage, I was like wiping the car. Like the steering wheel was never that clean. And then everything that everybody touched. And you actually felt weird doing this in front of somebody, like, oh, you like had cooties and touched everything. Right. We were living for months of just wipe it all down, everything, We went to a wedding last week, and there were little bottles of hand wash on the tables. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're still doing this, really?
But on the other hand, you went to a wedding, which wouldn't have happened 2 years ago. So
I went to 3 weddings recently. We're like, oh, these are all the people that would have gotten married before. This is what ended up happening.
It was a very, very, very strange time. It is really weird to think back on that. The more I talk about this book, the more I remember what it was like when I was writing this book, just what it was like in my own house. And we were very, very lucky. But thinking about how weird that was. Everybody was home all the time. I mean, all the time. And our blender was always going. Something in my family was always making a smoothie. I feel like all through COVID, something about my kids were just making smoothies. So I would sit down to write, and we have a really loud blender, and I could hear it from anywhere. So I'd be writing, and I would just hear all the time.
Oh, remember the last time I talked to you, we were sitting I was in my dining room where we'd set up like this ladder with lights on it. Like we came together and pulled this thing, in this bookcase we brought home from the office and we shoved in the dining room. My husband came to me about October, and he says, we need to have Thanksgiving. We need to vacate this room. We need to build you like a new place. And it was very, very funny. But for a long time, you weren't doing anything else in the dining room. You might as well go sit and record there. There were wires all over the place. And if I think back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, and nothing mattered. It didn't matter because nobody's coming in the house anyway.
Oh yeah, exactly. I know. It's very, very strange time.
But we sit there and think back. You're like, oh yeah, that's what I was doing at that point. Yeah, that's the day I brought the 2,000 square foot office furniture home. Yeah, that's right. So where are you on writing your next book? Oh, wait. Actually, let me go back to something. When I'm sitting there, like, I want to talk about the cover here before we do your next book. So Vacationland. Okay. First of all, was this always the title?
It was always 2 years ago during that COVID summer that became the title. And that my friend who owns the house is the one who thought of the title, which was great. I think we had thrown around a few a few other titles that weren't quite clicking. And then we kept going back to the drawing board. So then we just came up with a whole list of anything that had to do anything with Maine. And my friend said Vacationland, and we went, yeah, that's it.
That's it. That's it. It's like, it's the perfect title. It's a perfect, like, take this to the beach kind of a book. And then the cover. I know that like Maine beaches look kind of different. So I remember hearing you talk somewhere along the way about you had to look rocky. It had to look like a Maine beach.
Right.
You feel like you're going to climb down the rocks to the Maine beach. It's not going to be like the other beaches.
Exactly. Yeah. It took a little while to get here, and it still doesn't look like most Maine beaches. There are beaches in southern Maine that are sandier, and York and Wells and those towns, but not where my book is set. So we did have some back and forth. Originally, the first cover they showed me was very light blue, almost like Malibu Rising kind of cover. And that just felt nowhere close to Maine. So they kept going back and making the water darker. And they did try, I think I kept saying, can we have a breakwater? Because the breakwater in Rockland plays into the book because you can see it from the house. And I wanted a lighthouse or breakwater or lobster boats or something that felt Maine-ish. So they did send several, but for some reason it just, they just looked stuck in there. It didn't really work. So here we are. I think that the color of the water is
the color of the waters.
And there are sandy beaches, just not exactly where the book is set. So it was a little bit of that, sometimes you have to leave it to the experts in marketing who know what covers people are going to look at too. So
yeah, and you want to see people in the water. I think they're thinking people on the beach and in the water, as opposed to this remote place, which is going to be some Gothic thing that you're going to be like, oh gosh, climb up the water, and there's going to be some history happening there or whatever,
If anybody wants to see what the actual view from the house looks like, I have pictures on my Instagram account that have the actual steps down to the water and the lawn and a little bit of the porch, and probably the house is on there somewhere. And I'm going to keep posting things about the town that appear in the book because there's so many actual locations.
And you were known for doing that in your other book, but Newburyport, the ice cream.
Oh yeah, I did that.
Places. I remember you doing that in the past, So the audiobook is narrated by Stacy Glemboski. Did you figure out she was going to be the narrator? Did you have a hand in that? And do you listen to audio?
I'd have never listened to my own audiobooks. I love audiobooks. I listen to a lot of them, a lot in general. So I think they sent me a few, maybe 5 people to listen to. And she was one of the ones I liked the best. I think there were 2 that I liked a lot, and they said they would see which one they could get. So I haven't heard any of it. I probably won't. It kind of makes me cringe to think of listening to my own books, but in general, I'm a huge audiobook fan. Huge. I probably get through more audiobooks than I get through paper books these days.
That's interesting. Well, I listened to the beginning, and it's where Christy's coming into town and where she's trying to get. And so it was really interesting because I wasn't thinking of Christy. I was thinking of the family first. So I forgot that the book opened with her coming into the town. The stranger comes to town. There you go.
Right. Yeah. I think originally it didn't. I think originally we opened with Louisa, and I can't remember. I don't remember how or when or why we changed it, but we did.
Well, it works because it's sort of a prologue in a lot of ways to what's going to happen in the rest of the book. And that's the reason for me, it totally was there. And I, got what she was saying. So you're also involved with the Newburyport Book Festival. You've kindly asked me to interview guests in the past more than once. How did your involvement with that come about? For you living in the town, is that where you started working with them?
Yes, I've only been, thank you so much for always participating when we ask you to. You're so good. We have to get you in person next time because you're not too far away. You could get up. I started as a participant just when my first novel came out in 2011. They asked me to do a reading, and it was my first ever reading at one of the bookstores that's no longer there. We had 2, and now we have 1 in town. I was so nervous. Oh my gosh. When I think back to that day, I was like, my knees were shaking because I had never ever read my own work in front of people. It was terrifying. But anyway, they were very nice to me. And then over the years I had participated, and then I think maybe right before COVID, maybe the year before, or maybe it was the COVID year. Yeah, I guess it was, I was really going to get involved the year that COVID hit, and then we had to pivot to online. So I guess for the last 3 years, I've been very involved as a member of the planning committee, and will continue to be in the future. But hopefully we're going back to in person, which is, we all miss.
It's funny, we miss it. But for me, time schedule wise, I love it. I love being able to be virtual and just sit down in a chair. I really do, because I can do a lot more. Because like that day I finished that and went out to lunch with a friend, which I wouldn't be able to do. And my time is so super limited that I love being able to, they asked me to do Tucson, and I was like, I don't have 4 days. I just don't have 4 days to be away. But I also love the fact that virtual, people will sit and watch this interview, maybe when the book comes out, maybe when they read it, maybe when it comes out in paperback, maybe when they find it when it comes out in paperback, and maybe later when they find this book they're at a beach house and they find this book on a shelf. And that's what I love about the idea of doing a virtual interview, is it has the longevity. And while the other has the excitement of being there with the author in the room, this has when people find the book. And sometimes I've actually seen people talk live and I didn't really get what they were talking about because I hadn't read the book yet. And it's so dicey for you talking about a book before a book comes out and not giving anything away. So I'm of two different schools of thought on it. Once I've been able to do these, and we realized earlier this month, we hadn't put out a new interview yet our podcast numbers were through the roof and we couldn't figure out why. And they were watching all the old things because, and I asked our readers why they do that. I go, well, we find the book. That's when we listen to the interview. And I was like, that's kind of fascinating because I thought you'd do this like right away. And they go, well, we may listen to it, but then we'll go back after we've read the book. So
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think it can be great. And with the literary festival, I loved that we were able to get people. We had Lisa Jewell joining us from London. We had people from Australia, and we were able to do those sorts of panels that we never could have done, obviously, in person. And we don't have a budget to get people from far away. Most of our people are in New England, but we also kind of lost a little bit of that local feel because we used to be only Newburyport and New England. And so now it's just like, how is this different from other festivals? So you sort of have to figure that out too. But it's nice. I don't know how you do this all day long. I find it I love talking to you, but like confusing to get to the computer and like be all set. So in some ways, when I'm out of the house, it's easier than in my house. We also have a new puppy. So I'm like, okay, the puppy's in the pen. I'm going to go downstairs. So for me, it's a little bit, a little bit scattered, but once I'm sitting and talking to somebody, yeah, you're right. Then I can finish and go to the grocery store and do all my other stuff. It's great.
And this time when I was watching the airports last weekend, I was like, who is flying to do these events? And I'm like, there was somebody I saw online, took 2 days to get to London. Other friends never made it to New York last weekend. And I'm just there like, you've got this huge tour flying this summer. I would just be ripping my hair out, like going, do I have to get up at 4 a.m. to try to make the flight? Is the flight really going to be there? And I think it's super, there's something really nice. Linwood Barkley said, I lost no luggage. And he says, I missed no planes. He goes, it was really kind of easy. So I don't know. I go back and forth on it. I do miss seeing people, but also I think I'm at a point in my career where I've done that. If I hadn't done it, I think I'd feel differently because, the idea of doing this, but yeah, it's like, it's been very, very funny to sit there, but I actually moved desks. This is not where I sit to work. So I actually moved the laptop. So I move into a different spot to do these interviews. Which
that's nice. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And I come down to my basement where I have my bookshelf. So it's all kind of private down here.
It makes sense like this from different feeling. So does listening to the other authors, when you hear them talking about their work at book festivals, they're handling their craft, they're writing their schedules, does that have an impact on you of, everybody feeling the same way? Or that's a great idea, some takeaway just for being involved, even just in the festival you're working on?
Yeah, I love hearing how other authors work because everybody's different. I think it's so interesting. And I'm like Lisa Jewell, for example, who consistently, I think she's at least a book a year, and they're for years and years and years and years. And I love her books. So they're always fantastic. And she just talked about, I just go to a coffee shop and I write every day. And then I have, until the book is done. And I thought, okay, that makes it sound manageable. It wasn't some crazy, well, I have this magical potion that I'm putting in my coffee and that's why I can write these books. She's just working like everybody else. So I like to hear, there's no shortcut, there's no way around it. So I like hearing it. Sometimes it's good to hear that from other people too, And
I remember when she said the coffee shop was closed, she had to rent an apartment because she had to get out of the house to go do this. And she was talking about how she had to rent this place. And because she didn't want to spend a fortune renting this place, she had to write, she had to sit there and keep going because it wasn't like sitting in the coffee shop with the price of a coffee. It was, I'm paying real money to do this. And she also mentioned that when she starts the book, she always has some little idea, and that's where it takes off from. And I always joke with her because I try to figure out what the idea is. And I was wrong last year, but I thought I was finding this little paper on the ground that says, dig here, body buried.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Oh, that's funny. I loved that book. I thought that was phenomenal.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting, but it's also to see how everybody works through. And I think it's fun when you're at the festival to sit there and hear, how do you do this? How do you get through it? And blah, blah, blah.
And I love hearing, and I know you and I have talked about this in previous conversation. I love hearing stories of other people's failures because it makes you better if you've had any yourself, but also everybody has them. So it sort of is a unifier, I think, too, to hear what people, because you sometimes you can look at people and think, oh, that must be all very easy for them, but there's really nobody that it's easy for. So I think it's good for newer writers and established writers all to be reminded of that.
I remember Kristen Hanna saying that she was 350 pages into writing her last book, and The Four Winds. She was and then she discovered the character it was going to be about, and then she rewrote the whole book.
Oh my gosh!
Before, she wrote from 3 different points of view. So so you've got somebody who's writing a book that's not coming out every year, but still is in there and just realizes, now I've got the story. And you tossing that many words is really hard to do, but to get it to the right place and say, that's the character. And that's where you're actually workshopping yourself on the page, to have that moment to call your agent editor and go, I now found it, and this is what I'm going to do. And I think that the more you hear those stories, the more the authors are talking about these things, the more you realize that it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. It doesn't have to be right the first time. And if you take an extra year, it's really okay. It's really fine.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love hearing people talk about their relationships with their agents and editors. That's the part I'm always curious about, because it's like a marriage. Everybody's is different and you don't know the inside of it. So I really I did a panel at the festival this year with 2 authors and their agent. And I could have talked to them all day because I wanted to hear about, well, how is it for you guys? And what do you do here? And it was really, I think people who are not published really like that. And I think people who are published like to hear that too.
Yeah. And how do people work with their agent? Is their agent reading along the way? Where do they get it? When do they get it? Does the editor get it at the same time? Right. And I think that's just something that if you're new writing, you don't know. And even if you've been writing a long time, it's like, well, wait a second, what if I do it this time, this way? Yeah. And it's not just this outline. I'm going to go a little bit further. And I think that as your craft gets stronger as well, or it gets more fine-tuned, you can sit there and go, I'm really not doing great right now. I need to stop this. It's going in the wrong direction. And half the time you're kind of lying to yourself. Like there are times where there are times we write a newsletter that goes out every Friday night. And there are times I'm in the morning and I go, I've got nothing. I've really got nothing. And I've got to write something to get us into this newsletter. And I don't have a thing. And our editorial director goes, you always come through. And then all of a sudden some idea will come and you're writing it. But literally Thursday night, I'm like, I've got nothing. I have no idea what I'm going to do here. And
I know.
And it's like pulling it out and going, oh, and then you can sit down and write a great scene about the house. And you can just describe this house for like pages and pages and pages, go, I got something done today. I'll use it later.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's the key right there. For me, that's the key, is to get those 1,000 or whatever words written every day, unless there's a crazy reason why you can't, but just to get that done. Eventually you'll have enough words that you can make a book out of them.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, you can edit them down and you can do something with it. It'll be totally fine. Totally fine.
Right.
Well, as always, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much. Great. And I look forward to seeing what you do next summer. It's like, I'm ready. We might be
ready early. We'll be able to get out early. We'll see.
We'll see. It's always like worth it. It's always, but move ahead of your timing,
Yeah.
And to our readers and listeners, we look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye. Thank you.